credits registered. I want to welcome you. This is an interesting subject called engagement of residents, year 2. How many of you happen to be in year 1, the year 1 experience? How many of you were in the year 1 experience? So you've just now put yourself in jeopardy, because one of the things that might be available if it springs into my dead brain will be to ask people who were in the previous session that was in Denver, correct? Yep. How that might compare to this one. So you just put yourself in jeopardy. I'm sorry I had to track you like that. But, we're going to go ahead and get underway. First thing we want to do is introduce you to the panel, and then I will give you a little bit of background in terms of how we hope to proceed with this. One of the things we want to do is we want to get participant your feedback on the things that you hear, in addition to raising questions with the members of the panel. We would like you to raise other kinds of questions about resident engagement. I heard in a brief time talking with Marilyn about resident engagement, where she's the chief operating officer. And it's a fascinating story, which actually demonstrates that it really can happen. It's a telling. It's a truth or tell, and it really comes out on the sharp end of the program. And I hope she will make a good contribution to you in terms of the facility that she's with and how they did that. And she's got some pretty strong background information, I think, that will be helpful to you. Well, let me introduce the panel. As they are seated, to my immediate right is Ellen Handler. She's the president of the Organization of Residents Associations in New Jersey. Now, we have an event that we want to applaud, because Ellen was a leader in the effort in New Jersey to get residents' rights approved legislatively in the state of New Jersey. So let's all give Ellen a big hand. The second? Oh, okay. So she said this was the second time around. And so she's an experienced individual in these issues. She's available to you here. She's going to tell you how that was done. And it was done with engagement between the provider, between the state legislature, between the NACRA people and the people at her level, at the state level, and it works. And it did work. And so we want her to share that with you. The next person is Marianne Caldwell, resident at St. Paul's Towers and Oakland. Oh, I skipped Marilyn. Oh, Marilyn Kennedy, the chief operating officer. She's going to speak second at the Episcopal Senior Committees in Walnut Creek, California. And I was able to have this conversation with her in terms of how she was able over a period of time to create a culture of engagement and the differences between when she started and when she finished, and it's an amazing success story. And then our last presenter, Ms. Caldwell, is going to talk about how that worked out, that whole process of resident engagement from an administrative perspective, how that worked out from a resident's perspective. So she's going to give you the resident's view of engagement in a successful program of resident engagement in the facility. So I think you've got some very precious experts here who can give you ideas and who can give you information about how we can improve the resident engagement issue between provider and resident. So I think you're very fortunate people. You're fortunate in another way. I came down here about 3 o'clock just to, as a person in my role, is supposed to do. You know, the door's locked, Is the water distributed, do the microphones work, and all that kind of thing. I walked in that door, and I thought back to my college days when I worked in the meat shop at a university. It was like a walk-in cooler. So I scampered around, and I found somebody who had the capacity to get heat into this room. So you now may celebrate and celebrate me for getting the room out. So now that we've celebrated everybody, let's get on with the issues. I will make a few remarks to kind of kick the subject off, and then I'm going to turn it over to the panel, and then we want to have a really good exchange. Much has been said before about resident engagement in the CCRC lifestyle. And our task today is to share some engagement experiences with you, and I've already mentioned that, so that we can begin to spread the word in terms of how to make this work on a fairly difficult issue. Providers have one perspective, residents have another perspective. My personal experience, having lived in a facility that went through a bankruptcy, and I can tell you, you only want to do one of those in your lifetime. Because the trauma of a facility going into bankruptcy is substantial. And we don't know much about what I call the soft stuff. We know a great deal about some of the hard stuff, which in the end comes down to numbers. How do you make the thing work financially? And it's a real challenge for providers. We just had experience at my facility around the hiring of contract staff versus shift or work staff, fixed labor costs in the therapy section. And the place almost went into mutiny because the right procedures and protocols in terms of communicating and engaging with the resident. And one man, as he left, summed it up very well, and he said, I don't feel respected. I think he hit the nail on the head. Well, anyway, we have people that can help us pick our way through that. I want you to hold an image in your mind. And for those of you who were in the workshop that I led earlier today with Catherine Pearson, is she here? Catherine in the back. For those of you who don't know her, she's one of our guardian angels who works with NACRA pretty regularly, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
But here's the image. For those of you who have heard it from the last meeting with Catherine and I, image this up. There are two horses. They are strapped, harnessed together, rear end to rear end. In other words, they're both pulling in a different direction, and they're in harness. And beyond their reach is a substantial bale of hay, which is a life-sustaining source for them. However, if they keep pulling in different directions, ultimately they won't make it. They will theoretically starve. Hold that image. If one of those horses can be labeled the provider, and the other can be labeled the resident, and you hold that image, and you don't change it in any way, where they can share the direction of the food source they need to survive, they won't make it. Neither one will make it. So we're bound together, like the two horses in the image, which was a training picture that I had and had used with my staff on a number of occasions when we were looking for cooperation and collaboration. So the image conveys the seriousness of the issue. Many changes are taking place in CCRC living. The lifestyle is going to be different. The recession that really was the major trigger has had a tremendous impact on shifting models and the paradigm shift of living in CCRC. The best solutions to all of the future issues that we're going to struggle with lie in the hands of the collaborative relationship, in my opinion, between the residents and the providers. Whatever their differences are, as they try to work through the paradigm shift that's occurring in the CCRC industry, they will have to do it together. If they can't figure out how to do that, they will be the worse for it, both of them. So, there is my introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Handler, and she's going to tell us about what has happened in New Jersey.